All right, so here's why I really want to do this. I honestly don't think that there's anything revolutionary about what we're trying to do here. What you need, you good? I just think what we know about church is, I hate to say it, but is radically different than what we actually see. I know everybody has different church backgrounds, so I'm not talking about specific churches. I think when the world looks at the church, what they see is different than what we actually see in Scripture. So what I want to start off with is just read kind of, if you were to say, what is Chris's and Darcy's and Nate's and Alejandro's, the reason I'm going to keep saying Chris's church is we don't have a particular name. It may come at some point, but right now that's not the important thing. So I'm just saying Chris's church for a moment. So when you read Acts 2:42, they, talking about the early church, it says they were continually devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. And it says everyone kept feeling a sense of awe, and many wonders and signs were taking place through the apostles. And all those who had believed were together and had all things in common. And they began selling their property and possessions and were sharing them with all, as anyone might have need. Day by day, continuing with one mind in the temple and breaking bread from house to house, they were taking their meals together with gladness and sincerity of heart, praising God and having favor with all people. And the Lord was adding to their number, day by day, those who were being saved. So, what I'm going to break down from this is what we do as a church. So I'm going to give you 3 things that we do as a church, and then I'm going to give you 5 things that we expect to see because we do those 3 things. Real simple. Okay? So the first thing, it says that they were devoted to the apostles' teaching. Last week we went over devotion. We talked about worldly devotion versus biblical devotion. Does anybody remember the difference between those two? You want to share with us? You weren't here for that. You can still answer that.
Yeah. What was it?
The difference between worldly devotion and biblical devotion. While he's thinking, anybody else?
It was the level of commitment that you do. You gave an example of your devotion to your marriage and to your wife and to your family. Mm-hmm. That may be different than the devotion we may have to going to a scrimmage game or whatever.
Right.
You talked about the Greek word devos and how in definition would be like without ceasing, without no matter what the difficulties or things come in life.
So if you were to go into Webster's dictionary, devotion, the way we would define it now, is love, loyalty, or enthusiasm for a person, place, or thing. Right? However, the word that's used here in the original Greek, I'm not going to say what the word is because it's long, but it means to continue to do something with intense effort despite difficulty. And we were talking about those are the 2 differences between worldly devotion and biblical devotion. It's very easy to be enthusiastic about someone, but it's very easy to be less enthusiastic when things get difficult. Am I right?
Yes.
So when we talk about devotion, we have to think that when I say that they were devoted to the apostles' teaching, they were devoted continuously with intense effort despite difficulty, which means that if it was difficult, they still did it, they continued to do it, and they worked hard at it. So teaching is foundational to this fellowship. We have a high view of teaching, honestly, because Jesus calls us disciples, right? And a disciple means a student. So a student is somebody who's learning. So if you're not devoted to any type of teaching, you're not really a disciple. And that's really the difference between what the world deems a Christian and what the Bible deems a Christian. Other people call the followers Christians. Jesus called them disciples. So it's easy to just say, okay, I'm a Christian. Why? Well, my mom's a Christian, or my brother's a Christian, or my sister's a Christian. But Jesus would say a Christian is someone who is following me. And we learn here the first thing that they did was follow teaching. Now, we can learn from a variety of means and experiences, but the Bible is specific to say that they weren't just devoted to learning, but they were devoted to teaching. Here's what I mean. The Bible puts emphasis on teaching. It actually says in Ephesians 4, it says when Jesus was raised from the dead, he left and goes back to heaven. And it says he left gifts to men to help equip the church. One of those giftings was teaching. It was a big deal for him. Good example, in later on in Acts, you'll see that there's a time where the apostles, these leaders of the church, they get called because we find out that you have all of these disciples together and there are actually widows. And here's the thing about the early church. It was Greeks, it was Jews, it was Romans. It was people who typically wouldn't like each other, right? So you already have this tension of people people literally felt like they were unclean. Like we know about racism now, but their racism was completely different and it was way rougher. Not in what people did to each other, but how they felt towards each other. And so, but now with the early church, you have these people together. And so here's how much issues that they had. They're feeding widows. So back in the early church, or not necessarily the early church. Go ahead, take your time, buddy. Anyway, sorry, that's where I was. So in those days, when a woman, when she divorced from her husband or when her husband died, they weren't allowing really women to work like that. So she didn't have anything. So you have these women who don't have anything because they're widows and they're feeding them. And people were actually saying, nah, that's a Roman. I don't mess with them. I'm not going to give her food. Right? So this is a big deal. Well, they call the apostles and they say, listen, this is what's going on. We need you to come and get people right. The apostles' response to them was, no, it's better that we not serve tables and do that, and better that we teach. Now, if you know anything about the Christian faith, that's not the response that you would think that they would give, because the Christian faith is all about serving. But the apostles are saying, in this particular situation, it's important that we teach, because that was a big deal to them. So it's important to be clear that they weren't just devoted to any teaching. It wasn't this, it says they were devoted to the apostles' teaching. So it wasn't that they were devoted to feel-good messages about like how you can conquer the giants in your life. They weren't like devoted to just wise teaching that made you feel smart or enthusiastic teaching. They were devoted specifically to the apostles' teaching. Now, how we should understand this, we shouldn't understand that they were devoted to the apostles and then what they taught. Because all throughout Acts, we get that the apostles were telling you over and over again, we're not special. You shouldn't look at us like we're Jesus part 2. We're regular people. So it wasn't that they were devoted to the apostles and what they taught. They were devoted to what the apostles were teaching. And here's what they were teaching. They were teaching that righteousness could come from faith in Jesus.
Amen.
Amen.
Here's why this is important. Understand that most of the people who originally got saved, they were already Jews, which means that they were already devout. It's not like people got saved and they were like, you know what? I think I should go to church. Like, no, they were devout people, which means that they went to the synagogue all the time. They were observing laws, like they weren't eating pork. These were religious people, but they weren't devoted to that teaching. They were devoted to what the apostles were saying, and that now this righteousness is made available just by faith. They preached that if we would repent from a life lived in our own way, under our own rule, if we would turn that life over to Jesus by belief and faith in him, we would be saved from hell. This is what was revolutionary. This is why they were devoted to the teaching, because the teaching was radically different. Most people think that just because people go into a building on Sundays that those people are holy, or those people are righteous, or those are good people. The Bible would not agree with that at all. Because even when Jesus came back, he said the Pharisees, who were the leaders of the church at that time, he said that they were the worst because they did all this stuff, but their hearts were just wicked. Anybody ever met somebody that seemed like they were devout in some form of religion, but when you talk to them, they were just
hateful.
hateful,
Yeah.
ugly on the inside. Right. You just agreeing? Okay. I thought you was asking a question. Oh, okay. All right, don't tell us about it yet, though. So here's why this is important. And if we don't understand this as a foundation, here's what I don't want to happen. I'm less concerned about people coming in here. We don't even have enough space. So if more people don't come next week, I'm fine with that. And not I want everybody here, but here's what I mean. It's super simple to get a charismatic guy to sit in front of you who can tell you funny stories or motivate you, and you still not be grounded at least in what the disciples were talking about. And what the disciples were talking about is what the Bible has said all along. The Bible says that it's appointed for every man to die once, and then comes judgment. And everything that you, here's what's one of the most scary things about the Bible to me. It says it calls God the one who judges hearts. Most guys my age, when they get into a committed relationship, they would say, I would never cheat on my girlfriend or wife. That's man's standard. So you can look at me and say, oh yeah, you're faithful. But here's what Jesus says. Jesus says, if you look at a woman with lust in your heart, you've already committed adultery with her. That's God's standards.
Amen.
Here's the beauty. The teaching that the apostles came with says that your salvation doesn't depend on whether you can get that lustful thought in check. It said that your righteousness comes from what you believe about Jesus and if you decide that you want to follow him.
Amen.
Amen.
Like that takes this bar. Listen, God put his law in here. You know what's on there? Wild stuff. I don't even know what the Lord was thinking. Like you can't eat shrimp. You can't eat pork. Like all types of stuff is just wild. They took that bar and put it down here with what do you believe about Jesus and are you willing to lay your life down to follow him? That's what they were devoted to. So be clear. That's what we believe here, that salvation is found in Jesus, not in any other God, because there's not any other God that came down to give his life. It's not like God is giving out free passes. That's what Jesus is for. Jesus came and died a death that we should die. God is just. The Bible says that the penalty for sin is death. And what that means is Jesus came and died a death for everyone. Anything that you've ever done in your life, he's died a death for it. What's more is that this teaching that the apostles taught, it doesn't just stay at forgiveness. It continues to freedom. So everything that we just read, it doesn't come just from being forgiven. Here's what I mean. Giving your life to Jesus begins to recreate in us what we should be. Remember when I first started talking about the kingdom of heaven? See, here's what that looks like practically. There's a reason why some of you don't get along with your family. There's a reason why some of y'all don't get along. Hey, she's fine. She's not bothering me at all. Yeah. That's what kids are supposed to do. One of my old pastors, he used to say when kids would start screaming and crying in church, he'd be like, don't y'all look at that, baby. Kids crying. That's what you're supposed to do. That's how you know they're working. Because here's the thing. So yeah, it's great. God is recreating things for sure, but he's recreating you. So that stank attitude, he's recreating. And not you, people you know. Anybody know people who's always offended at something? You can't breathe in one direction without them being offended. God's recreating that. He fixes that. It's not just he erases your past and he says, okay, cool. All right, now go and try and do it better. Old Testament says that God has put his spirit in us so we can walk in his ways. Anybody need help being patient? What about the God of patience? Try him on. Anybody need peace? What about the God of peace? He's recreating those things in us. The disciples could do all of this stuff that we just read, not because they were special. They could do this because they were free from anger, from offense, from lust, from pride, from suicidal thoughts, from depressions. Their scars from their past were being healed. And people in here have experienced that. Anybody been betrayed? God actually heals those scars. People who've been betrayed, raped, all types of abuse, God is healing those things in the people of God.
Amen.
Amen.
Honestly, this is just a quick little sidebar. When I decided to walk with Jesus, it's because one of the reasons was because I looked into a lot of different religions. Every religion says the same thing, saying in a sense of they say humanity is messed up, and this is what we say you should do to fix it. So some people it's meditation, some people it's pray this many times, don't eat this. The Christian faith was the only one that says God sent his son to do it for you. And if you believe in him, he'll fix it.
Amen.
I came to Jesus not because I thought Jesus was not just because I thought he was dope. I came to Jesus because I understood that all other gods are weak and insufficient. Not one God, and I know my stuff. Read the religions. Not one God that people praise put his life on the line, period.
Amen.
They're not worthy to be followed. They're not worthy of devotion. They're not worthy of doing something continuously with intense effort despite difficulty. They're not worthy of it, period. That's the apostles' teaching. And the church, the disciples, they were devoted to that. They were focused on that. They didn't leave that. It was very clear. If you talk to a disciple in the early church and you ask them, what do you believe? They're going to Jesus right then and there. So, our fellowship is devoted to teaching that exalts Christ and sets us free to walk in our true identity. That's number one. Number two, fellowship. We hear that. If you're a Christian, you probably hear it a lot because we use really churchy words like fellowship. But fellowship is actually comes from a Greek word, koinonia. I can say that one. And fellowship has two different definitions, right? Or two ways that it's used. One is contributory help or participation, and the second one is sharing in or communion. So, fellowship is not just us coming in here and hanging out. And biblically, it's not even us getting together, talking about Jesus, or just being real churchy in general. Based on this definition, there is no fellowship without the sharing of something. This means that when we come together, it should be with the intention to give. Now, it's important when you hear this, don't hear it from somebody else. Like, don't hear it like, yeah, Nate, you should be giving. Like, no, I have to say me. The intention is for me to come and say, what can I give? Louis is a fantastic example of that. Like, Louis is, and that's not to anybody else's detriment, but Louis he's looking at himself. But Louis, like, when we talk about getting together, that's the first thing that Louis asks. What can I bring? Even Nate, when Nate got here, he said, was I supposed to bring something? Like, that's an... Sorry.
So it was for you.
Until I got here. Before. Yeah, no, but I'm saying, but that is a heart of fellowship. And a lot of times, like, people get, when you talk about church, people get caught in a vibe, like, man, like, everybody's loving here, oh, people are funny, or whatever. But the reality is, that's really not biblical fellowship. That's not even what they meant. They meant coming through and we're all contributing.
Amen.
Like, fellowship was actually more economic than it was anything else. And we'll see that in a second. Community is people coming together for a purpose or a cause. That's what community is. But fellowship costs you something. It's like, y'all ever heard the old joke? It's corny, so you don't have to force a laugh, but it makes a point. It talks about in a bacon and egg breakfast that the chicken gave something, but the pig gave everything, right? Cost the pig more because bacon you have to die, right? It's the same thing. You just got it. Oh, I thought she was like, oh. So we see that in 44 and 45, and I'll just reread it. In 44 and 45, it says, all those who had believed were together, and they had all things in common. And they began selling their property and possessions and were sharing them with all as anyone might have need. Now, when it says that they had all things in common, it does not mean that like they all like the Redskins Or they all, I'm sorry, or the Cowboys. It definitely doesn't mean that they like the Bucks, because that's crazy.
This is okay.
Or look, let's keep it a buck. It doesn't mean that they all voted for Trump or Obama. That's not what they had all things in common means. It literally means that everything that they had was for the common good. Like it's really, I don't want to get, because it'll be boring, but the word study is literally everything that they had was the common good. So what I have is yours. The fruit of their fellowship was that no one had need of anything.
Amen.
When you read Acts, it says that over and over. It says that none of them had need for anything. That's what fellowship. Now, if that was what they did with their things, it's not a stretch to say that that's likely what they did with their time, with their energy. Like relationships cost energy.
Yes.
Period. And they cost time. But this early group of believers said their devotion to the fellowship means that I'm devoted to you. That means that I'm going to devote myself to you continuously with intense effort despite difficult closeness. When we sacrifice for others, it brings us closer. It says that they were of one mind. They began to be more of a family. That's how you do it. Like, people, it's so interesting because I've been in church for a minute, and I'm telling you, pastors everywhere are trying to figure out what they can do to make sure that their church is closer. And what they do is, let's get a bunch of people in the room. And that's great. But at some point, y'all, like, if y'all keep on coming, I'm going to expect some of y'all to come and help with some of these sandwiches. like it's not just us facilitating people to come together. How we get close, how we become one mind is when I sacrifice something for you. They say another thing here. It says they believed with one heart and one soul. It was a supernatural thing. This is best shown by the fact it says that they were devoted to breaking bread. So there's two ways we look at that. The first way breaking bread is typically communion. Anybody taking communion?
Yes.
Okay. So the other way is what we just did, just eating together. And I believe that eating together is important because eating is an intimate thing in general, right? That's why when people get together, when people have food, there's an intimacy there. But more importantly, the breaking of bread and communion, what they were doing is when they got together, they revisited Jesus' sacrifice for them. Everything that I just talked about, everything that the apostles taught was this idea that Jesus died for us and now we live in him. I thought that was coming over the top. That was what their communion was. They took communion, but when we take communion, we proclaim the sacrifice of Jesus and the new covenant we now have in him. So what they're doing is they proclaim to themselves every single day that they were devoted to whatever that teaching was. So what fellowship really is believers imaging Jesus to each other. In Philippians, it says this. This is how believers should be when we get the picture of Jesus. It says, talking about Jesus, being in very nature a God, he did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. What it's saying is, Jesus didn't come down like, I'm God. That's not what he did. It says, rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. What it's saying was Jesus didn't come down like this mega king. He didn't just float. Like, he literally came, was born in a manger. The first thing that he smelled was animal feces. Like, he lived in a poor place. His father died, so he was even poorer. Like, Jesus came recognizing the lowest of lows. And the reason that he did that was so if he takes out his godness and says, I'm going to have things in common with you. So when we come and we sit together, that's the first thing that we should be thinking. How can I image Jesus to you? What can I do to serve you? That's a huge portion of fellowship. So, second point is, our fellowship is devoted to the care of each other, even at a loss to ourselves. Third thing, prayer. It says they were devoted to prayer. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I'm actually going to have somebody talk on this in a while. But plain and simple.
Sunday.
Yeah, on another Sunday, not today. Plain and simple, prayer was a part of the culture of the church. Now, keep in mind, it doesn't say that they prayed at everything. It doesn't say that every time they went to church they prayed, or every time they went to the temple they prayed, or every time they met they prayed. That's not what it says. It says that they were devoted to the act of prayer itself. So they didn't pray a lot because they did a lot. It wasn't an add-on. They were devoted to prayer in the same way that they were devoted to teaching or the fellowship. It was its own thing. What this means is they didn't pray because it's what you do. They prayed because they were aware that they needed God.
Amen.
So for me, if I meet someone who claims to follow God, if their prayer life don't match, I'm very skeptical. Very skeptical. Because what it says to me is that person, they're trusting in their own strength. And that's not what I want. That's not somebody that I want to follow. Like, you have to, if you're claiming to live a life for God, you got to have some type of connection with him. Like, if you expect to have fruit, Jesus said, he says that the people who are believers, that they abide in him like a vine, right? Like a grape on a vine. If you take that grape off the vine, eventually that grape's going to die, right? But if it stays to the vine, you're good to go. He says, apart from me, just like that grape, apart from me, you can do nothing. And the first way that we do that is a constant devotion to prayer. Devotion to prayer is it's a crucifixion of your own pride. We pray things through. So other point on this, it doesn't say that they were devoted to prayer by themselves. It says that they were devoted to prayer together. So my desire is for us to be a community that is devoted to prayer together. Make sense? So our fellowship is devoted to prayer together because we are in need of his direction and his strength. So those classify what we do. So practically, right now, every Sunday, at least for now, we'll be doing some type of teaching, right? And it'll be teaching that is going to center on Jesus and what he's done for us. Now, I mean, it's going to be practical to our lives, but I think every Christian, the most practical thing that we have is Jesus. So it'll get back to Jesus for sure. But we will be devoted to Sundays, right? Now, when I say that, I don't mean like we're not doing attendance, like I'm not checking in, like we're not a community based on the things that we show up to. We're a community in number 2 in how we fellowship. Like I can be devoted to you, and you can be devoted to me. You can be devoted to this fellowship, and you just work on Sunday, so you can't come. I get that. We'll work that through. But practically, how we're devoted to the apostles' teaching is what we're doing right here. Fellowship. We don't want to be just a Sunday crew. So our goal is to be in each other's lives outside of this. Whether that's a random dinner sometime. Last week we had dinner at Alejandro's with Miss Pizza, and she told us her whole story. We actually heard their entire story of their life. There's more. We didn't hear her whole story. But it was a cool time. Like, it wasn't like, nobody taught anything. We just sat and we talked and we ate pupusas. It was fantastic. But even in that, it cost them something to do that. Fellowship was a contributory thing there. And then prayer. So we pray on Wednesdays. Right now, we pray for this. A few times we pray for other things. But we pray. And not because it's a prayer meeting, but because we need that time where we all can get together and pray. Real simple. Now, lastly, I want to get to the 4 things that I think we'll see if we do devote ourselves to this. Okay? So, number 1, I think that we will have a continuous sense of awe. So in 47, it says, or 43, sorry, it says just that. It says that they had a continuous sense of awe. Now, important, we talked about this before. You guys remember the word that they use for awe? We talked about it last week. Phobos. Phobos means fear, actually. It says they had a continuous sense of fear. What it meant was a continuous fear of God. So reverence is what they had. Like, you guys ever, I don't know where everybody is in their Bible, but there are certain times in Old Testament where God comes and God will literally say, before you come any closer, take off your shoes, because this is holy ground.
Yeah.
Right?
Moses.
Moses. Over and over in Scripture, when God would come down and they realized that they saw God, they say, I'm dead. I just saw God. How can I stand in His presence? Like, is it a reverence for God? right? It's mixed with fear, right? Because if you're in the hands of a holy God, it's terrifying. But it's good at the same time. Great example, in when Jesus, you guys know Jesus when he stopped the wind and the waves, right? They were amazed at it, but it said that they were filled with fear. And they said, who is this?
Yeah.
Anybody ever seen somebody do a miracle? Heal, I don't know, whatever. Okay, I can tell you, it's amazing, but it creates this reverence. I feel like if we do these things, we will have a continuous sense of awe. Continuous teaching on Jesus, on fellowship, and prayer will keep us in a continuous sense of awe. So that Phobos, I'm praying that will be our environment. Why? Real simply. Constantly feeding on the sacrifice of Christ. Even when I first started, and I started talking about the apostles' teaching, and I talked about Jesus, you could feel the reverence rising. So when we constantly do that and constantly put our faith into practice with each other, constantly praying to God, I don't think that there's any magic bullet, but I think that's a way to cultivate a continuous sense of awe. Second thing I think we'll see is signs and wonders. It says that. It stretched his hand out in signs and wonders. They sought out signs and wonders. So, just so we don't idolize the apostles, it says the apostles did them, but you don't get too far into Acts till you see that those signs and wonders begin to be done by regular disciples. And now, not only that, they continue to be done in the church. We have people here who pray for people and seen them healed. We have people here who have seen all different types of miracles. I'll let them tell you about that. So, we expect to see them, but here's the thing. Not because we're trying to be superheroes or we're trying to do, anything magical. We see signs because God is with us, and God is a sign. He's a wonder. Like, you cannot tell people that you have a relationship with the creator of the universe and then just have a regular life and there's never any wonder to it at all. It's just inconsistent. He is where the power for everything we're talking about comes from. In verse 43, it says that signs and wonders were taking place through the apostles. It's not that they were doing it themselves. Even when you pray for signs and wonders, in chapter 4, they didn't ask for just signs and wonders to be done through them. It says, will you extend your hand to perform signs and wonders? It's his power, which means that it can come through anybody. And it should be something that's expected. I mean, really think about it. If anybody just has a little bit of living knowledge about Jesus, you know that Jesus healed the sick, he raised the dead. He did all these different miracles. But his followers did the same thing. But now, sometimes we can be in place and it really just seems like they're just a regular group of people meeting together. That's wildly inconsistent. And I really mean that. Because here's the thing. How can we follow someone where it says over and over that people came to be healed and he healed everyone who came to him? Mm-hmm. And then we turn around and we be like, oh, bro, you should take an aspirin. Look, I'm not saying I pray for people and they haven't been healed. But I pray for people and they've been healed. As a believer, my responsibility first is to pray for people that they be healed. Why? Because I'm trying to introduce everybody I know to a God that can heal. Amen. Period. It doesn't mean I gotta get weird. It doesn't mean I gotta get crazy. Like, I've never kicked open a door and been like, you shall be healed. Like, that's just weird. I'm not blowing on people when they fall down. Like, no. But what I'm saying is, signs and wonders is consistent with the creator of the universe. Jesus stopped he said stop to the winds and waves, and they obeyed him because he made them. There has to be some type of encounter like that. And I believe that as we follow Jesus, we will expect these signs and wonders. Or we will see these signs and wonders. Third, favor before men. This is a real quick thing. And it says it in 46. It says that they had favor before men. Right? Real quick on this. We should increase with the favor that we have with people, not just other Christians. That's really, really important. The Bible says that we are salt. Not salty. It should not be, we're Christians and we vibe really well together, but when we go out there, we're weird, we don't know how to talk to people, or we're judgy, or all types of wow. Anybody ever met a Christian that you were like, bruh, I don't want nothing to do with that thing? I meet them all the time, and I'm starting a church, and I'll be like, yo, Lord, maybe we should do this a different way. I don't even want to be called a Christian if this guy's here, right? Yo, my wife is telling me all the time that I need to stop pointing. I'm pointing.
Because it'd be so aggressive and be like,
Yeah. I'm a child of the 90s.
That's why he's sitting
aggressive.
there. That's why he's sitting there to get a double dose of this.
I mean, this is a big deal. Keep in mind, when Jesus first started preaching, it says that he would go into the synagogues and preach. Here's why this is so important. You can't just go into a synagogue and preach. It's not like they were like, oh yeah, you're Jesus. Like, they didn't know who they didn't know he was Jesus, but in order for him to have that platform, it meant that he had favor before men. It meant that he was a nice dude, and that he wasn't weird, that he wasn't he was a nice guy. He had favor. Even Paul, they put Paul in the prison, right? They put Paul in the prison because the Jews, he was speaking against this religion. The Jews, they put Paul in the prison. But when Paul met the people who ran the prison, they were like, man, this dude's cool. They put him on house arrest. They're like, all right, go home. You can have people visit you. You good. Why? Because he had favor before men. Amen. Like, we don't talk about it a lot, but that's a big freaking deal. Like, nice to people. Even if your coffee's taking mad long. Like we should be nice. Like, people should smile. If you go to a place often, when you go into those doors, people should smile when they see you come in. I believe as we devote ourselves to this teaching of who Jesus is, as we fellowship with each other, and as we pray, I believe we will see us have more favor with men.
Amen.
Lastly, adding to our number those every day that are being saved. It says that every day when people were being saved, God would add to their number. Now, here's what's important. I don't care so much about the numbers. Even now, if everybody brought one person back, I have no idea what we would do next week. So already, I don't even know.
we would go to another place.
We would go to another place. Yeah, for sure. Like, we wouldn't do it in here. But we should see people being saved. Like, that's like a big deal. And here's why it's a big deal. Like, understand God's plan is for more people to come into the kingdom. God's heart is not that we would get together and then we come and like, this is real dope and everybody come, and then we leave here, we go to a bigger house, then we go to a bigger meeting, we have our own building, we have this huge building, and everybody comes in and it's fantastic. Like, that's not God's plan. Like, I don't know if you know this, like, even when we read in the Bible, every church that existed when the Bible was written, none of them exist today. Because God does not care about buildings. He cares about people.
Amen.
Hey.
So what that means is, if we're doing these things, we should see people saying, I want that. That forgiveness you're talking about, I want that. That healing you're talking about, I want that. That fellowship, I want to be a part of that. I need direction and power in my life. I want that. And we should see people saved. Very simple. So, having said that, does anybody have any questions?